Welcome to the Charity Changemakers Podcast, the show where we dive into the journeys, challenges and successes of the leaders shaping the sector today. Each episode I'll be sitting down with the senior charity leaders to hear their stories, uncover their insights and explore what it really takes to drive change today. And if you enjoy the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, like and share to help us reach as many people as possible and showcase the incredible charities that are coming on the show. So whether you're a charity professional, a trustee, thinking about joining the sector or making that next step in your career, or just passionate about making an impact, then this podcast is for you. Let's get started. I'm really excited for today's episode of the Charity Changemakers Podcast. I'm joined by Matt Hyde, who's the Chief Executive of the Lloyds Bank Foundation. Now, Matt's had a great career within the charity sector, working within student unions and the National Union for student unions, and then also for Scouts, Chief Executive of the Scout Network, and then moving on to Lloyds Bank Foundation. He's got great experience, so loads of fascinating insights that Matt shares with us. And we spend a bit of the time of the conversation talking about the difference and the impact that small local organisations can have in their community, and then coming together to have that greater impact across the wider society. This is a really fascinating conversation. It could have kept going for hours and hours and hours. Without a shadow of a doubt, Matt's one of those guests that would just love to have back on in a few years' time and hear more about how the foundation has developed in the way that it's working and supporting organisations across the country, and the impact that it's having in advocating and representing local organisations on a national level. Anyway, that's enough from me. It's time to get on and to meet our changemaker. Really pleased to welcome Matt onto the Charity Changemakers podcast today. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
It's very good to be here, Adam. Thank you for inviting me.
No, you're very welcome. And Matt, I can never do justice to an introduction to anybody that comes on the podcast. So in a minute or so, can you tell us who you are and what you do, and just give us a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, I'm the Chief Executive of the Lloyds Bank Foundation. So we're an independent charitable foundation that supports people with complex needs through charities and community-led organisations. And we are funded by some of the profits of the Lloyds Banking Group. And my career's been in the not-for-profit impact world. I previously was Chief Executive of the Scouts for 11 years, and before that, Chief Executive of the National Union of Students for 7 years. Yeah. And I'm also Vice Chair of Comic Relief and the co-founder of the Big Help Out.
Yeah, brilliant, great. And we'll be diving into, I'm sure, all of those different areas and places that you've been in as we spend a bit of time through the podcast, obviously talking about your career journey and route into the charity sector and things that have supported and helped you along the way. We love to start these podcasts off with some quickfire questions, get to know our guests, the listener, the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So the first question that we've got for you is, what are you listening to or reading at the moment?
What am I listening to? My 17-year-old is rediscovering, I'm rediscovering through him early 1990s stuff. So there's a lot of Nirvana playing in the house at the moment. I also kind of quite got into Chapel Roan, which is probably a bit... Can you still do that when you're now 50? But anyway, I think they're pretty cool. And then what am I reading? I've normally got a number of books on the go at the moment. So I am reading Precipice by Robert Harris, and I'm also reading the Michael Palin Diaries, Volume 4.
Yes, right, okay. Brilliant, excellent, superb. Everybody will be jumping to Nirvana in their Spotify playlist.
Yeah, exactly.
Once they finish listening to the podcast, of course. Jumping straight in and going for some nostalgia 1990s music.
It's still good. It still stands up the test of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Indeed. Yeah. No. There's. There could have been some much worse 1990s music being pulled out. Yeah. For sure. So Matt, I love this question, and we're getting such a range of answers to it. But what is a quality that you had as a child that you still have now as an adult?
So when I used to study, I for my A levels or things like that, I would do reading and I would go around my garden kicking a ball at the same time. And that level of multitasking has stood me in good stead. And even now, when I'm at home and I'm on calls or things like that, I'm still kicking a tennis ball around. So there you go. That's my rare skill. It helps me when I'm like checking my phone as I'm going through train stations and things like that without bumping into anyone.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm quite impressed with the. Can you do keepy uppies while reading, or on a telephone call, or is it?
I was more a kind of, so actually I played football for a number of years into my 30s, and I was a striker. I wasn't very good at keepy uppies. I was good at turning and shooting. That was the extent of my footballing talents.
Yeah, excellent. Well, all whilst reading, which is incredible. Yeah, no, that's great. Good. And the final quickfire one for you. If you've got a completely free day, how are you spending it?
Probably watching sport. I love football. I'm a Peterborough United fan. So going with my dad and my son to watch some football or cricket, occasionally dragging my wife along, but she's less keen. But that for me is, the sort of adrenaline rush of live sport, but doing it with friends and family. That's my happy place.
Yes, yeah. No, brilliant. No, that's great. I don't know a huge amount about Peterborough footballing club. Has it been a good? I know we're in the end of season before the start of the new season. Has it been a good season at Peterborough?
Adam, how can you not know about the mighty force that is the Posh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in League One. It was mostly a dreadful season, and at one point there was a risk we were going to get relegated. But actually, we did at the end of the season get to the final and won the EFL trophy at Wembley.
Yes.
And a rare pop quiz question is: the most successful club now at Wembley is Peterborough United. We've just overtaken Barcelona because we've played 5 times at Wembley and we've won every time.
Yes, right. Well, incredible record. I didn't back myself. I kind of felt like there was a Wembley trip in there, and then I backed out the question, and should believe. Well, Matt, I probably support the team that's probably got the worst Wembley record in that I'm a Sheffield United fan, and we were there yet again this year, and lost in our playoff final to Sunderland. So
I watched it. Harrison Burrows was one of from the Peterborough United academies. Following that progress very closely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping we can hang on to him over the summer. I think there might be a few suitors.
Good luck
coming
with that.
So
good luck with that. This should be more like The Rest Is Football rather than a sort of social impact podcast. But we'll get on to the boring stuff.
Yeah, we will indeed. We will indeed. I keep. My son's really keen to start a podcast. He's 9, and I think actually there's something around a father and son footballing podcast that I keep kicking around with him. That may watch this space, Matt. Maybe one day.
I like that. I can see that.
Yeah, indeed. But no, you're right. We're here to talk about your career journey through the charity sector. This always feels like a huge question, but I think we've had one guest on who, as a teenager, they were like, I want to work in the charity sector. That was always the trajectory. Everybody else has sort of that I've spoken to sort of fallen into it, and it just sort of happened. So what was your route into the charity sector? How did it all start for you?
Well, I mean, I feel like I was born into the charity sector and community-led change. So grew up above a family business. In the Fens, every Saturday morning I was woken up to by a bell like the one in Open All Hours, if you remember that used to wake me up. And that was a family business started in 1876, and the whole focus of the business was around community. And so mum and dad and my 2 brothers and my sister just volunteering and service was the kind of, I suppose, centre of our gravity, and still is. And so it was quite connected with the church. Mum and dad were involved, and in their mid-80s are still involved in lots of community organisations, from Rotary to WI to Chamber of Trade to school. Dad's still in his 85th year organising auctions and fetes and
incredible
band concerts and all of that kind of stuff. So that was how I kind of grew up. And then of course I was involved in the Scouts. I was involved in the very first Comic Relief, where I'm now, that was the first time I volunteered and fundraised, and I'm now vice chair of Comic Relief. But also, and then I didn't really think I would go into this world. I didn't really know there was a kind of career path. I think most in schools, I'm doing a talk at school next week, I don't think people even think about charities as a really powerful, amazing journey to go on in terms of your career, even though you've got a generation that's probably as civically and socially minded as we've seen in years and years. So I wanted to be a journalist, and so I went and studied English at Queen Mary University of London, got involved in student unions, and that took me on a path into the world of social change.
Yes, right, okay. And what was that? So coming out of university, what was that first role? Was that straight into charity sector then, as sort of a first sort of paid role?
So I was president of Queen Mary University of London Student Union, and that's paid role. And there were 5 sabbatical officers supported by a staff team. And, then I was like the chair of the board and also in this kind of paid position as well. Amazing organisations, welfare support, advice, advocacy, brought me into contact with understanding about what we probably now call social enterprise, but big commercial operations. And so it was really accelerated learning. And then I went from there to be president of the University of London Union, which was 100,000 students, got all the colleges that were part of the University of London Union, from King's to UCL to LSE to Imperial. And that was such a great platform in terms of learning, I suppose, about politics, but also policy and change at scale. Ran a big campaign that led to extending a student discount scheme for everyone on London transport, as was. And that was amazing. I got a real rush from that. And then I went on the staff side of student unions. After that, I went to King's and then Goldsmiths before eventually arriving at NUS. So it was really the student movement I owe a lot to, because it really turbocharged my development.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So you stepped into a chief executive role at the NUS, quite quickly within your career, would you say?
Well, I was certainly a chief exec at a ridiculously young age. So I was running Goldsmith Students' Union at the age of 26, and I did that for 5 years. And that was a very good grounding for me, because we did some very cool stuff around prison visiting and getting students into becoming prison visitors. It was quite an edgy, interesting environment, highly artsy, very creative, but it was also quite challenging. It was in New Cross, it was in Deptford, had to deal with quite a load of challenging issues with the local community, people trying to get into the nightclub that we ran as well. That came with a load of particular challenges. And we also ran a scheme for people from addiction and offending backgrounds. And this is kind of a bit where I feel like my career has almost come full circle, because at Lloyds Bank Foundation, these are some of the charities that we support that are working with people from addiction and offending backgrounds. And, they tried to cultivate this project called Open Book in the college, the Goldsmiths, which is basically a university. And it hadn't taken off the mentoring and the support side until they put it in the student union. It really kind of taught me a lot by working with some amazing people there, a guy called Joe Baden and people like that, who really shaped some of my thinking about the role of student unions in terms of the role they can play in communities. So I did that for 5 years. And if I'm honest, Adam, I was really worried. What I'd done is, even though I'd done an MBA alongside that, I was worried I'd got into a bit of a career cul-de-sac, and all I was ever going to do was student unions. And then I was approached about applying for a deputy chief exec role. It was called national director at the National Union of Students. And after a matter of weeks, my boss left, and I became the 5th chief exec in as many years. There'd been 10 years of deficits. I think that we had about 25 to 30% of the staff had a grievance out in one form or another. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire. I'm not sure it's the sort of job I do now, but at that stage in my career, it was amazing because I could take everything I'd learned from my MBA and sort of apply it on a bigger setting, and really get involved in shaping educational policy, representing the differences and nuances of different student communities. So really we really ramped up the research side. But the reputation of NUS within student unions, it was a confederation of about 600 student unions representing about 7 million students, was pretty poor, actually. And so it was a huge turnaround program and a transformation project. But the other joy about it is I was working with, as well as very good staff, I was working with some exceptional student officers, and many of those student officers are now running the country. So my president was, amongst others, was all my presidents were amazing. It's like, I feel like sometimes it's like talking about your kids.
Yeah, that's right.
They were all amazing, right? But one of them was Wes Streeting. And he obviously has gone on to very great things, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. But there were other people in the ecosystem who've gone into all sorts of amazing things in civil society and the civil service and business, but lots into politics. So Josh McAllister, Darren Jones, a whole sort of, it was an incredible breeding ground for talent, and allowing the sort of acceleration of really sophisticated political development. Tough for those people who went through that journey, because it's very, very exposing. But actually, many of them became pretty hardened by the time they're now taken office. They also grew up in as social media was taking off. So if Twitter was 2008, they were growing up even as student politicians in the public eye. And I think that really has made a lot of them very sophisticated at how they deal with the complexity of the world in a way that other people have struggled to deal with, how politics has changed. And while I was there, we also dealt with things like tuition fees and lots of challenges around that in terms of the demonstration of 2010. But you were really at the sort of center of the news at the time on things like the raising of fees, what that meant for the Liberal Democrats who had signed the NUS pledge not to raise fees. So it was an incredibly exciting, energizing time where we felt like we were doing a lot of good. And, I think we saved about £2 billion for students over that period, and probably stopped even worse things happening than actually did in the end.
Yeah. And for you, as you talk about obviously going into that role and at the NUS, and, obviously clearly, some instability there with so many chief executives in a short space of time. And you say you type of opportunity you might look at differently now at this stage of your career. I guess there's a naivety of potentially, being younger and in career and at the start. In that journey, because you then, at the start of the conversation, you said you were there sort of seven years, I think. What were the things that, supported you, energized you, really, helps you to develop as a chief exec in that role? What were the things that were around you that was helping, supporting you in that role?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, as what you'd say, that I did lots of the technical stuff around the MBA. That was really, really helpful, just to give confidence around, the strategic management, financial management, legal aspects, some of the, as I say, some of the more sort of technical and commercial aspects. But I mean, the key thing always, and still today is true, is you're only as good as your backup team. So you're only as good as the people around you, whether that be your own senior managers, the mentors and coaches you surround yourself with, the peer groups you're in, and the networks you build and establish in and around the kind of ecosystem. And actually, at that time, I also started to branch out of just being in a student bubble, and started to, I like to think, help position student unions and the student movement in a much more recognised place within the wider, what we then called third sector, but civil society space, because there wasn't really that mixing at the time, and there wasn't that kind of leaning into the fact that we were charities, and that was quite different when I was on that journey. But it's all about who's around you, Adam, that can help you deal, help you talk things through, help you give you the confidence when you need it, to hold you to account when you might be getting a bit carried away or with your own press. And so that, and as I say, I still have numerous mentors, lots of peer support groups I work with, and that's what gives you the energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really interesting, because I think, being chief executive, and obviously, being chief executive for a number of years now in a few different organisations, the importance of, like you say, that network around you, the peer-to-peer support, that sense of people journeying with you, because people often reflect to me that chief executive roles can feel a little bit lonely at times, or where can you turn in times of need, and just being able to have that network or coaches, mentors, peer-to-peers that understand where you're at, and being able to either vent or bounce ideas, I guess, in those moments is hugely critical.
I think that's right. I mean, the bit I would layer on in recent years is, and I'm a bit of an evangelist around this, is I actually think these jobs have got harder. There's less money around. The demands are more extensive. I think an age of social media makes it tougher, particularly if you're leading a national brand. And therefore I would kind of add into that toolkit psychosocial support in really tough roles as well, where you can afford it, because where you go mentally in these leadership roles can at times be some dark places, and therefore how you support yourself, the self-management piece is a constant. And it's not something you crack. It's like constant, that expression of constant gardening. You have to keep working on it and perfecting it, because if you're not in a good place, the people around you won't be in a good place, and you will be a less effective leader as a result. So, that's something I think you get better at over the years. And I think it's particularly true of people who are in smaller charities and smaller organisations as well. We haven't got necessarily the available resource that others have got for that more resource intense support that you really need. And I think, but even there, where people who are chief execs or leaders of charities, where you're in that situation, smaller local community-led organisations, finding ways in which you can almost beg, borrow and steal mentoring support, coaching support, building your own networks within a locality as well. All that stuff really, really matters. I mean, think about it's almost like being a sort of performance athlete. Half the battle is a mental one, and how you are attuning your skills and qualities, but or how you can be the best version of yourself. That's that is all what the battle's about.
Yeah. And I guess within your, I mean, I don't just want to skip over obviously the role at Scouts, but I guess within your current, role with the Lloyds Bank Foundation, you've got this, I guess, really unique opportunity in the way that you get to know a lot of small local organisations and see how that is working in the local areas, in local communities, how chief executives are having to respond, like you say, in really difficult, challenging circumstances, and and how they get those support networks around them.
That's right. And so, as well as kind of unrestricted funding, and when I say longer term funding, 3 years and hopefully more than that where we can, some areas we're investing in sort of 10 years. So you've got that stability. We also do a lot on organisational development support, so a sort of funder plus model, whereby if you need a strategy consultant or fundraising consultant or CRM system, we'll invest in that as well, including some of the charities I've seen in terms of investing in coaching and mental health support as part of that. In addition, the other thing we do is we work very closely with Lloyds Banking Group in order that staff from the group are also volunteer to support those local charities in a number of different ways as well. So it's really about one of the things that is have driven us forward for a number of years, and this I'm absolutely convinced will be a central part of our new strategy when it goes live next year, is how we're trying to build resilience into the system. I became a bit obsessed about personal and organisational resilience pre-COVID, but it really obviously kicked in COVID. And, it's tough out there. There is a slight risk that when you're in a leadership position in the sector, we also join it by showing empathy to recognise how challenging it is for people. There's a risk you can start to almost make the situation worse. And what we need to be doing is saying it's really tough out there, and let's help find the support or help you to think about how you can manage your organisation by ensuring both the organisation is more sustainable, but you're more sustainable as well. And, that is really hard. And what the risk is that people end up working 60, 70-hour weeks. And I get it because I've done it. I can tell you absolutely now in a position where I'm not doing that, the quality of my thinking is so much better. And I'm a much better leader than I was when I was just working all the hours that God sends.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you... I mean, obviously, you're working within the charity sector and the, I guess, delivery of services in the organisations that you've been in before joining the Lloyds Banking Foundation. Do you think that really impacts the way in which you lead the organisation? And you talk about a new strategic cycle and that leading into one of the biggest corporate foundations here, and about how it delivers that support to these local organisations, because I don't know how many you fund, but we're talking about thousands of organisations, right? It sounds like there's more of this whole. It's not just about giving out money; it's this holistic support and ongoing support to enable those organisations to establish and make sure that they're having the greatest impact in whatever area that they're working.
Yeah, I mean, so this is our 40th year, and over that time, in real terms, we've invested £1 billion into about 45,000 organisations. And, to the credit of my predecessors, they, I think, in many ways led the way on unrestricted funding and longer term funding and the funder plus aspects of investment in the wraparound support that you need in order to build that resilience. And I hear people come up to me and say, my charity would have folded were it not for the fact that you gave us not just the core funding, but the additional support that went around with it. And I think, you reach a stage in your career, having led in different contexts in the sector of small, medium, large organisations, and sometimes a bit of everything, because Scouts was a federated charity of 8,000 separate charities. I mean, that's 5% of all charities in England and Wales. Where you want to use that platform and it's a very privileged platform when you're a funder, in order to think more deeply, to build resilience in the system, and also think more deeply about how the system needs to change in order that, what I am absolutely convinced about is that the role of the voluntary and community sector and community-led change has to be the driving force of a decade of renewal for this country. And as a minimum has to sit as an equal partner and a critical partner alongside the state and the market and business, which is why funded by the UK's largest retail bank, that's why it's opened up so many opportunities for us. We believe, and we'll be able to say more about that in early 2026.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Have you personally, how have you found that transition into working into an organisation that funds others? I guess slightly different tact in some ways for yourself. Yeah, how have you personally found that transition?
Well, I'm not going to lie. It's a lot easier being on this side of the fence than it is kind of doing service delivery. But as I say, I kind of recognise the privilege that goes with that. And each week on LinkedIn and things, I sort of share reflections from the week. And the reason why I do that is because I think I'm in a very lucky platform and space to be able to share what I'm seeing, do some of the thinking that I know that it was much harder for me to do when I was running something that was so intensive, and also to help join the dots up a bit more and hopefully give a little bit of inspiration for some people where I can. I mean, look, I love the space to think. I love I've loved learning about both what we fund and how we fund, and the world of trusts and foundations and philanthropy, because that's perspective I've never approached social change at before. And I'm really enjoying working with colleagues in Lloyds Banking Group as well, because that's new to me in terms of that whole corporate world. But my goodness me, the prizes there are massive. And whilst we are an independent charitable foundation, we are funded by this huge machine that literally is, in many instances, on the high street, that that has 65,000 staff, and that has 27 million customers across Lloyds, Halifax, Bank of Scotland, Scottish Widows. So, when we're talking about systems change, that is quite a system. And the flow of capital, both financial capital and human capital, has to be paramount in our thinking about how we build resilience into the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a huge challenge when you think about the size of the corporate entity and the foundation working together. I mean, actually, it's interesting. I mean, we work with some foundations where I guess the foundation is kept a little bit at arm's length from the corporate entity that has either founded it or but it doesn't sound like, and clearly from the longevity and impact that the foundation has had, it sounds like there's a very close working together between foundation and obviously the banking group as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's very important that we, for all sorts of reasons, not least charity law, maintain our independence and are driven by our charitable purpose, and that is our North Star that's driving us. So, how are we supporting those people with complex needs? How do we ensure that we're playing our role, that everyone in England and Wales is in a good place? And how are we going to those places where the market is failing, in order that we can work with and invest in and champion community-led change and community-led actors, small charities, but it might not just be small charities, in order that we can make the biggest difference. And, if you were any charity and you were looking at how we're going to make the change, you'd say, well, what resources do we need? Who can we take with us? Who's going to give us the greatest access to that? Yeah. And, lo and behold, it's right under our nose because because of, these sort of assets that I've talked about. As I say, we'll say more about that in 26 because we are having so many exciting conversations at the moment. And I don't think it would be such an available prize were it not that this was a banking group that has a very public commitment to helping Britain prosper as its purpose and has purpose-driven leadership, I believe, and what I've seen, within the form of the chief exec and his team and the chair and the board. And so, but our lens on that is a community lens that, that in order to help Britain prosper, then communities need to prosper.
Yes.
And I'm having that conversation in multiple different places, whether that be with the government. We interestingly sit at the nexus of government, purpose-driven business, and civil society.
Yeah.
If we can unlock that with some examples of how you bring that to life, then I think we can do something that is truly impactful for the country. But we're not going to do it on our own. It also doesn't mean to say we need to do it all in order to unlock that change. And that is a difference, Adam, from leading a brand where you are brought back to thinking about, how is this the best thing for our brand?
Yes.
And it's just harder, I think, when you're wearing the clothes almost of a big national brand. And I think it's much easier as a funder, or I have found it easier to think systems because of the nature of what we're doing, what we're funding, where we are, and how we can sort of play an enabling role as part of that.
Yeah, yeah. And part of that enabling role, I guess, is about sharing those stories and the impact that these smaller local organisations are having, and like you're saying, being able to feed that high up the chain into government, and that. And across a whole range of different areas, just because like you say, there's not always that reflection of just the amount of charities that are, at work and doing things day in, day out, providing a whole range of services into our local communities that if we weren't there, many things just fall over, right? And that's,
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, that's, when I visited about 70 odd charities since I started last September. When I go and see a women's charity in Cardiff, as I've done, or I go to Great Yarmouth and I see incredible organisations there tackling homelessness, but also building the sort of community around that to give people the support so they can move on from a hostel to move on accommodation to a home of their own. Or when I'm going out and seeing an African women's organisation in Oldham or any of those things, that is health creation. That is about giving us people a sense of belonging and meaning. It's helping develop their skills. It's helping them into a life of prosperity, and it's being done in a way where it's reaching hyper-local communities that often large organizations and large systems struggle to reach. And big state-driven solutions that try and deal with that have been found lacking fairly repeatedly. And it's the reason why I'm so passionate about what we do, what we invest in, what we fund is the numbers are pretty stark if you look at how much of state funding is now going into health, say, and that it's going to push beyond sort of 50%. Now, if you kind of look at the next 30, 40, 50 years, your 9-year-old, my 17-year-old, they've got a much better chance of living to 100. So this is a good thing, right? But, therefore, you've got to think about health creation in a different way that doesn't just rely on the state and the market being the solution. So there is a positive vision here about how, by investing in local communities, community-led change, not just thinking it will just happen because it's happened in the past and it will happen in the future. So rather than just seeing it now as part of the landscape of prevention and a local ecosystem, and sometimes I feel, when I hear people, there's a slightly patronizing view about what people are doing. Turn it on its head and see this, create a vision that's around community-led change. Because I think the public are up for those sorts of discussions, but we have to be realistic. In order to do that, funding has to flow into local voluntary and community sector, including infrastructure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're only scratching on the surface, and we could probably talk for hours about how you try and unlock that potential in local communities and bringing people together, and like you say, that flow of funding that comes through. Absolutely fascinating topic. It's one of those that maybe we need to revisit in a future podcast. So I guess once new strategies launched, and come back and revisit in a couple of years time. Matt, always a little conscious of time as we fly through these podcasts. They like I say, we just scratch the surface. I mean, if you're happy, we'd love to, when this goes out, love to tag you on LinkedIn. I'm sure there'll be people that would like to pick up the conversation or find out more, or hear, follow you to hear more of these stories from the local sector. So if you're happy with that, we'd love to love to do that as well.
Very happy to.
I mean, we've kind of delved a little bit off of a career trajectory. So if I just sort of bring us back into that with a final question for you, Matt, if you could go back and speak to yourself at the start of your career, or those late teenage years, or maybe when you're going through university, and give yourself a piece of career advice, or tell yourself one thing, what do you think you'd say to your younger self?
I always struggle with these sorts of questions. And I tell you why, because if I told my younger self something at the age of, say, 18 about what I know now, I might have adjusted my behaviours in a way that would have led me to a different path. And I'm very, very lucky to have had a fantastic career whereby I've worked with loads of amazing people, really amazing people, at all parts of society. And I've built networks that are now really serving me well in order to be a better leader. And so we are the kind of, with the creation of all of those experiences, including the tough times and including the difficult times. And that's okay. Because as long as you have got the right support mechanisms around you, it's all learning, and you're stronger as a result. I mean, I think what I would say is, I'd probably say it's going to be all right. So don't unnecessarily worry. There are times, a couple of times in my career, I thought, what have I done here, and have I got myself into a position that means I'm not going to be able to make that next move? And it's turned out, well, so far, it's turned out all right. But equally, I think the thing that I've done well, that I would say that others, that I would kind of share as advice, I suppose. The thing that served me well is building networks beyond my immediate environment and my immediate space. I mean, it's the kind of classic "who moved my cheese" thing, that there are things, and even now, I'm involved in conversations that are not directly in the sort of wheelhouse of Lloyds Bank Foundation. But you know what? All of these things are joined up. So actually, now I've got more confidence to look at the link between the early years work that we did at Scouts around launching squirrels and everything I learned in further and higher education and skills development and what that looks like. But guess what? That links with if you're moving people from a space where they need a home, but they need personal resilience. They need, in order to do that, they need digital inclusion, and digital skills, they need financial resilience. But also then I would think about what we did with the Big Help Out around community creation. And guess what? That links to health. So, and then how do you communicate that to the public? Well, that's what I picked up in Comic Relief and my time there, and working with amazing people like Richard Curtis or Bear Grylls at Scouts. All of these things are the confluence that make you a more dexterous leader, and a better one. And then you also think about some of the tougher times, and tough times I've had in my life as well, where when you're having a bad day, you can also sit back and go, do you know what? Is it that bad? Probably not. And there's worse things going on in the world. So that goes back to that point about management of self. So, that would be a very long conversation, probably with my younger self.
Yes, that's right, indeed.
And and my younger self would be saying, "Are you still supporting Peterborough United?"
Yeah.
And I can say proudly, yes.
Yeah. And there's plenty of good times to come at Wembley. So indeed. So no, that's good.
Exactly.
Matt, it's been absolutely fascinating. And I think, honestly, we could speak for hours. So many questions, so many areas that we could go into. But it's been really, really insightful to hear your reflections on leadership within the sector, to see about some of the challenges that organisations are facing, to hear about, obviously, funding models and that holistic support that obviously the foundation are delivering and continuing to develop and work upon, and clearly exciting times ahead that we'll keep an eye on as well, coming up. So incredibly grateful for you giving up some time to come on the podcast, and really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Really good to talk.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Charity Changemakers Podcast. I hope you've been inspired by the incredible work being done across the charity sector. And this episode is proudly brought to you by my business, Charisma Charity Recruitment. We are passionate about delivering top-tier recruitment services to the charity sector that we care so much about. If your organisation is looking for expert support, then we'd love to help. Please do get in touch today. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe, like and share, because it helps us reach more people and showcase the amazing charities that come on the show. And for more episodes, please visit our website, charismarecruitment.co.uk. So until next time, keep change making.